Okay, so again, welcome everybody that's come here in person. We're glad to see you today. Um, I've spent a little time talking to Peggy, and I just want to introduce her to you all, both online and those of you that are with us. Peggy is an NDEer who has made it her mission to spread the near-death stories and experiences of everyday people. Wouldn't you say that's right, Peggy?
Yes.
And she wants to do these chats with people that are everyday people and not just those that rise to meteoric fame. She thinks it's important for those voices to be heard as well. Her channel is called NDE TV, and Peggy has interviewed over 200 people in a little over a year and a half. I think that's right, Peggy.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you're right.
And I just want to say I'm very proud of you for doing that. That is amazing that you've done that. That takes a lot of drive and, just a mission to want to do that. And we really appreciate you giving those people the opportunity to speak about their stories. And let me just let you know that Peggy has had 2 NDEs, one at age 5 due to a near-death drowning, and another one at age 25 from an ectopic pregnancy. Her second NDE brought back memories of her original one and helped her begin a long integration of both, I'm assuming. You can tell us more about that as we go, okay, Peggy. And writing a book of memories was her way of reordering and making sense of her life within that process of integration. And her memoir is entitled Will of a Wildflower, which speaks to her determination to rise above unhealthy relationships and life experiences, more so than revealing all the aspects of her actual NDE. But today, we want to focus on her NDE and how she believes both of them influenced her life. And just so you know who Peggy is, Peggy's a retired counselor, a social worker, and an investigator. And her NDE story has been featured on Dr. Oz, NDE Radio, Artists First Radio, News Media, IANDS International Conference, IANDS groups, and many NDE podcasts. So let's step back and let her share her 2 NDEs, along with the ways in which they've helped change her life. If you're a newcomer to our group, you'll have a chance to ask Peggy questions at the end of her talk in our Q&A. So get ready to take notes as she speaks. And so with that, Peggy, welcome. Take it away, and we'll perhaps chat a little bit along the way if we feel the need. So you go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm going to jump right into 1986. I was 25 years old, married. I had 3 little boys. The youngest one is actually my nephew. We were in the process of getting permanent custody. We had temporary custody. And so 2 weeks later, I was going to be going through that hearing. So this is an important time in our life. We were just bought property, ready to build a new home. And I was 2 months pregnant for twins. I started having pain. I called my doctor, and I was concerned it might be a tubal pregnancy because my first husband, he had made me get my tubes tied at age 20 after my second C-section. And I always wanted a lot of children. He came from a big Catholic family, 12 kids, and I always wanted a lot of kids. And so I was devastated. But 5 years later, I found out I could have it reversed. So I did. Very next month, I was not only pregnant, I was pregnant for twins. So I was at the peak happiness of my life. And I started having that pain. And the doctor said, Peggy, I did an ultrasound when you were in the office. Both babies are in the uterus. It is not ectopic. A couple of days later, the pain got so bad I could hardly walk. I was on the couch, couldn't hardly get up. Called him again. Peggy, don't worry about it. You're fine. By Friday, because it started like on a Monday, and like Wednesday, it was worse. Friday, I started bleeding and I was in so much pain. So I had my husband leave the kids with his mom, and we were driving our way to the hospital to Marietta, Ohio. We're almost to the hospital, and my pain suddenly faded in such a strange way that I remember distinctively what my thought was. As strange as it sounds, my thought was, wherever my pain is going, that's where I'm going. I knew I was fading away. I knew I was dying. And I didn't tell my husband that. I just said a prayer for God to not let me die right here, right now. Just let me get a few more miles to the hospital, because I envisioned I would die right then my husband would pull over. He would be outside running around the car frantic. Cars would be pulled over, have to help him. And I said, God, I don't want to do that to him. I'm dying right now. Just let me get a couple miles down to the hospital before I die. I don't want to do that. So we got to the hospital. He helped me inside. I went straight to the desk and I told the nurse, I said, I don't know if I'm going to throw up or pass out. I think it's ectopic pregnancy. My doctor says it's not. I don't know what's happening. So she had my husband stay, fill out the paperwork, put me in a wheelchair, put a little blue bowl in my lap, and start pushing me down this long hallway to find a room. So I thought, oh, I'm going to be so sick. I need that bowl. I couldn't lift one finger off the wheelchair armrest. I thought I lost contact with my body. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to be sick after all. I want to pass out. I want to pass out right now. Now, I'd always had irritable bowel, and, I'd throw up and pass out sometimes 2-3 times a week. It got so bad for a while. And so with that, it was just, passing out was, you just wake up later, you don't dream, you feel better for a while till you get sick again. So I thought, I'm going to pass out right now, thinking that's all was going to happen. I was going to pass out. My chin hit the chest, and suddenly I am somewhere else. I am in like a tunnel, and it's like this tight space, and I am zooming up through space. There's this loud noise of wind speed, like a rocket taking off, like you see on TV, that you feel that pressure and you hear that noise, and it just was just going up through space. And I thought I died. I mean, what else would that be? You're sitting in the wheelchair in the hospital, then suddenly you're in this. And why I felt like I was going up so fast through space was every now and then there was this knock, and I felt like I was going through galaxy and galaxy. And I immediately started looking around like, can I run away? Because I got 3 little boys, and this nephew, this is a crucial time in his life. If I don't get permanent custody, what's going to happen to him? And I said, I'm so sorry, my children. I've died, and I'm not going to be able to raise my boys. And I was abused all through my childhood, and I did not want anything to happen to my kids. I was a very protective mother, hardly let anybody babysit. And I was looking around like, can I run away? And then I thought, no, I'm way too far up in space. And this whizzing went and went. And then all of a sudden, the exact opposite of that loud wind speed and that loud movement and that dimness was completely reversed. Now I'm in this bright white light. It's perfectly quiet, and I'm just suspended in this light. And if you can imagine a room that was the floor, wall, ceiling is light, but also in the middle, like it contained light. And I look down and there's no me. I feel just like me. So I think, well, this must be heaven. But I'm thinking, where is everybody? Am I going to be alone for eternity? Did I do something wrong that I'm not aware of? And I'm looking around, I'm thinking, why am I alone? And then on my right, I see this faint outline in this whiteness, this very faint outline of a person's arm, shoulder, and their head. And then I see it's like a panel of people standing there in a line. It all's just a faint outline, though. All of it is, no color or anything. And then I see another row sitting up front, in front of that panel that's standing. And then my eyes focus as if I have eyes, because I feel like I have arms and everything still. I feel just like me. And I see this one sitting up front and center, and I think that has to be God. And I thought I had a complaint department. And I just started griping God out. And that's not something you think that you're going to go to heaven and do. If you ever imagine, wonder what heaven's like as a child or any time in your life, you never imagine you're going to go tell God off. And I was like, I have kids to raise. I cannot be here. And I heard God's voice in a male, firm, but loving voice say, the answer is no, that it was my time. And I just threw this big fit. No, I can't. I got to raise my kids. I can't leave them down there. It's a horrible, scary place. I can't leave my kids. And then on my left, this scene opened up. And it was if you just walked into a grocery store and you see the girl checking out people, and there's this little boy in front of her counter, and he's throwing a fit. He's screaming what he wants, and he wants it right now. And I believe that was God's way of showing me as a young mother, something I would understand is you're acting like a spoiled child. I was throwing a fit. And I thought, well, I got to humble myself here before God. I gotta try something else because I'm not done with this situation, pleading my case. And then as I am this invisible me across from me, I see a physical me and I'm watching it just the same as this panel and this person in the middle that I assume is God is doing. We're watching her and she is just spewing out every abuse. And then it was like somebody took a record player and turned it up fast. And it's like God's way of letting me know, you don't have to keep going. I understand. And I was telling every abuse to show God why I can't leave my kids down there. And then I said, if my kids will be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. If not, I beg to return. And then I see a man standing. I see him from behind, and I assume this is Jesus. And I see like a full color person, brown, shoulder-length hair, thin, is standing there, like waiting for me. And I come and join him. I'm now a physical body, and we go down. And like that, we're over top our trailer at night. And it's like it's a little bit in the future because my boys look the same age, but they're down there discussing the fact that mom has died. And my middle son, Jeremy, said to his older brother, Matthew, he said, I don't care that you say mom is dead. I want her back. I want her back right now. And I felt his pain so bad that I retracted. And now I am in a physical me in front of this panel of people closer to them. And Jesus is now sitting beside God. And I'm just crumbled and I'm taking all the responsibility. I say, it's not God's fault that I died. It's mine. I had my tubes tied. I had my tubes reversed. I knew there was a small percentage of a tubal pregnancy, and I got that. I took that gamble and I got it. I did this to me. It's my fault. My twins are now dead. It's my fault. I'm dead. It's fault. My sons are going to be raised without a mother. Everything is my fault. And I was sobbing the most horrible regret that you can imagine ever feeling. And then that was like that was washed away from me. And I thought, okay, I accept it. I'm not going back. It is my time. I have to accept this mistake. And I thought, well, okay, when my sons die, they're old men someday, I'll get to see them again. Because, that's what I always learned as a Christian, when you die and they all come. And then I got another horrible worry, as us mothers do. If we worry about one thing, worry about another. And I thought, what if my sons are so mad that their mom died at a young age, that they hate God and they never come to heaven? And then I am back sobbing all over again. And I feel I'm crumbled on the floor of heaven in front of Jesus. And I see my hands come up front of my face as I'm trying to look up at Jesus. I'm at his feet. And I say, who else will teach them about you? And then I'm back in that wheelchair. And first comes back my hearing. I hear a nurse is talking to another nurse. They have stopped the wheelchair. They're just chatting. And I'm thinking, she'll even know her patient just died. And then I feel my hands on the armrest. I have contact with my body. And somehow something tells me, once you feel your feet, you're all the way back. And then I was freezing cold. And I thought, what the hell was that? I was just in heaven accepting it. I say, this is 1986. I never, ever heard of such a thing. Couldn't conceive how this could be real, but it was real. And I thought, God just gave me my way. He said it was my time. And now I'm back. I felt like God had mercy on my soul. And I felt like I had a short amount of time to prove to the doctor something's wrong and get it fixed. Because if I can't, I'm going to die soon here. And so my doctor was on call. He come in, he examined me. He said, Peggy, your uterus is intact. Why do you keep saying it's a tubal pregnancy? I told you it's not. And I could not tell him. I was just in heaven. I just died. You gotta fix me here. Something's wrong. I could not say that. I could not say that because I was afraid that they would put me in a psych ward. My oldest sister's mentally disabled, and I have been with her and getting her to and from, hospitals and things she's been through. This was her son that we were in the process of getting permanent custody of. And I knew the consequences. And so I thought about my options. I thought, I cannot go home and die and let my little boys find me. The only option I have is to die here at this hospital. So the only thing I could say to my doctor, because I didn't say any of that, I just said, I'm not going home. And he looked at my husband like, what's wrong with her? And my husband shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. So he said, well, since you live an hour away, he says, you can stay overnight. He says, but there's nothing wrong. So he went home. My husband went home. I was in a private room. And I started waking up with that pain back in my right hip bone. And I would get my bowl, and then I'd wake up, I'm covered in vomit, nothing in my bowl. And after a few times, I'm realizing that I'm passing out I'm vomiting while I'm passing out. And the nurse was getting tired of coming and cleaning me up. She says, use your bowl. And I told her, I said, I'm passing out here. And so after this went on so many times during the night, I didn't have any more NDEs, but I started to catch on. I'm dying here and I'm coming back. And I said, God, I know you can't keep bringing me back, but please keep me awake or keep me alive until morning. Maybe my doctor will come in early and do an ultrasound to prove to me that both babies are in the uterus. And maybe then he'll find out what's wrong. And so morning come and they were taking me down to ultrasound. First thing in the morning, I thought, oh, good, this is what I prayed for. And the orderly said, get in a wheelchair and I'll take you down to ultrasound. And I said, if I sit up, I'll pass out. He said, well, I don't have an order to take you into bed, so get in the chair. Well, I fell completely over, moon deep. And so when I come to, I have all these nurses around me with smelling salts, and they said, we're going to have to leave you flat in the bed and take you to ultrasound because every time you sit up, you pass out. I thought, I've been telling you all night. So they took me down to ultrasound in the basement, and my sister had met me in the elevator. And somehow she had heard that I went to the hospital the night before. And she said, oh, Peggy, I want to see the twins, see the ultrasound. I said, I'm dead. And she said, I want to see the twins. I said, they're dead. And she's just giggling. She's ignoring me. And take me to ultrasound. And I know about the NDE. I know I was dead. And I know I am that close to death. But I can't get anybody else to believe me. Not my husband, my doctor, or my sister. So, I don't even try. And so I just know I'm that close to death here. And like, this is just over. Like too much time went by. I just know. And so I won't look at the screen. The technician comes in and she's rubbing the ultrasound on my belly. And my sister's like, oh, Peggy, I see the twins. I see the twins. And I'm looking at her instead of looking over at the screen of the ultrasound. And for a split second, I think, what if I'm crazy? That would be so good to be that crazy that I imagined that last night. And because that would mean I'm okay. And a few more months, I'm going to have these babies and they're going to come home with me and everything's going to be fine. You just accept you're crazy and deal with it. But in my gut, I knew that was real. There was no way I imagined that. But for a split second, I wanted to have hope. I wanted to be excited like my sister was about the twins. I just started turning my head towards the ultrasound and the screen, and the technician grabbed the screen where I couldn't see it. She jumped up, her chair fell backwards. She ran to the phone on the post and said, Dr. White, stop. And she ran out of the room. And I thought, well, I'm a goner. So Dr. White come in, he did the ultrasound and he said, Peggy, it's the worst thing imaginable. You have got internal bleeding filling your entire abdominal cavity, clear to your chest. We've got to get you into surgery now. So he said, since you're an organ donor, we're going to send you upstairs, sign some papers, and they'll bring you back to the basement, do surgery. So they put me upstairs. I filled out the paperwork, took me back down to surgery. And I didn't know till later they had called my whole family and said, she's not going to make it. I don't think they thought I would make it past filling the papers out. So as the doctor pulled me in for surgery and they wait for the anesthesia to take hold, I see a tear come down his face. And I turn my head because I'm 25 years old, but I'm dying. I figure I'm going to die during surgery. And I'm thinking, I told you all week, I came to the emergency room last night and I just wanted him to feel guilty, honestly, like I'm not giving you validation. So I turned my head and then, of course, come out of surgery and I'm in my room and the doctor come in and he's, Peggy, I'm so sorry. I know how bad you wanted these babies. And he said, you'll probably see doctors poking their head in to speak to you. He said, you're famous around here. This is the biggest tubal pregnancy the hospital's ever seen. He said the babies were growing and thriving. He said the problem was one baby was in the uterus and the other one was half in and half out. It was trapped. He said so close, but yet so far. So that was my NDE. I pushed it all away. I had all this depression from losing the babies, guilt for causing this, for having tubes reversed and then or tubal surgery and then reverse and then this tubal pregnancy, feeling this was all my fault, and then went home. And then I had the permanent custody hearing and I was on the witness stand all day long. I tried to get it postponed, but it wasn't, we didn't have an attorney. It was between my sister and her husband. And then if they were both found unfit, then we asked, well, we will take him if that's what you find. So that's what happened. So it was next month and I'm pregnant again. And we were at a family reunion and I was walking through. Is everything okay? You guys look frozen. Is it okay? I see somebody move. Okay. So I see everybody in line at the family reunion. And, they're a great big family and they're looking at the food and I hear a baby crying. And so I'm walking up the line. I was like, do you hear a baby crying? No. I keep going towards the sound up the line and everybody's just staring at the food. They're not paying attention. Like nobody cares that I hear a baby crying. And so I passed the line, I went past the pavilion and I'm standing out in this field and I'm like, the crying stopped. I no longer hear it. And something come over me like this other dimension. I don't want to say that. I'm standing there in the field, but I'm like, where is that? Where was that noise coming from? And something said to me, go to that patch of grass. And I'm thinking, patch of grass, why would a baby be in a patch of grass? But okay. So I went there and looked down and here that patch of grass was the edge of a deep ditch. It's a deep, narrow ditch. I found out later they had water in the cabins up on the hill and they had dug this trench to let the water come down through. But this little toddler had fell in that ditch and he was face down, his body just barely jerking. And I reached down back his shirt and picked him up. And he stood him on his feet and he looked at me and all this water's coming down and he ran to his family and they're standing there at the pavilion and he's pointing out right at me and they're shaking their head like they don't see me. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm standing right here, people. But the moment I picked him up, I knew I miscarried. So it was a few days later, we were at my husband's family, like I say, it's a big Catholic family, and they had these parties at every holiday and reunions and things. And nobody could say, I'm sorry that you lost the twins. And nobody could say they were sorry that I had this miscarriage. And they never liked me. I came from a bad home. And they knew that I had said that I was abused. And I was just not good enough to be married to my husband in their eyes. And I accepted it because my biological family always rejected me. And my husband really didn't want to marry me. And I was pregnant and I was just used to nobody loves me. I was always trying to be good enough, never good enough. And this really was just too much sadness. And so I just walked out of the party, didn't want to be around those people. I sat in the wet grass at night. I looked up the night sky and I just got lost in the stars. And all of a sudden, it was like this big movie screen opened up in the sky. And it just took me over and I saw my drowning from front to back. just like watching this movie. And it like let go of me, like this jolt. And I thought, did I drown when I was little? So the next day I went to my mom's house and I had two questions. Did I drown when I was little? And how did you find me? And she said, yeah, you did. And it was never to be spoke of because her first child of the six kids, had 5 living kids. He died at 9 months old and neglect. And so my dad's family blamed her. And so she didn't want anybody to know that I had drowned in this pond and, ended up, come to life. And at first she didn't remember how they found me. And then later she said, I thought more about that. And she said, when I noticed you weren't there, I had your brother John keep diving down where he saw you last and keep diving down until he found you. And he carried my dead body over his shoulders, carried me back to the house. But so what I remember the drowning, because, now I have this memory of this drowning. And like I say, it's still 1986 and nobody talks about these things, never heard of these things, but now I have these memories. And the drowning I was 5 years old and I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom playing Barbie dolls. And my mom walks in, she has this dish towel over her shoulder. I could see it like it was yesterday. And she flips that and she said, it's hot. She says, let's go swimming. Says, you and John go on ahead and me and Terry will be down after a bit. And Terry was older than John. I was the youngest. And the oldest 2 kids were home that day. My dad wasn't home. So John and I was quickly in our swimsuits and we were running down the road. And my siblings was never the type to look out for baby sister. I was the little tag-along brat that they just tried to avoid. And so he ran down to the pond and he got clear at the farthest end and dove in and did laps from center and back. And so I know I can't swim. I can only dog paddle a little bit. So I go where we always went down as a family. Mom never just sent us down alone. And so I knew where to go in on the side of the pond, the highway side. And where it was shallow, I knew I had to keep my feet feeling around for drop off so I didn't go in too deep, get over my head. And I kept watching for my mom and my sister to come down the road to the pond. They wasn't coming. And then I saw a board floating and I thought I could use that as a raft. I laid my belly on it and I went out to the center of the pond and I said, hey, John, look at me. And he swam out real fast, grabbed my board and started doing laps on it. And I sunk. I'm in the center of the pond and can't swim. I sunk. And for just a moment, the water's like this, and I can't get my head up. And then I'm under, and the water is muddy brown. And I lose direction of what's up and down, sideways. And I'm choking and I'm screaming. And it's an awful, lonely feeling to know that you are dying and nobody can see you or hear you or even know that you need help. And I think about my mom and my sister. And then suddenly I'm at the ceiling of the kitchen and I see my mom and my sister getting stuff out of the cabinets. I don't hear what they're saying. I don't hear any earthly noises. I feel their emotions. I feel how calm and concentrating and just their being. And then I'm back in that water and it feels like my throat is just going to burst open. And next thing I know, it's like you wake up from a nap, that real relaxed, comfortable feeling. The water's no longer dark brown, muddy. It's a light, transparent green. And I think my parents lied to me. Why did they say, be careful, don't go out too deep or you'll drown? Because I'm fine. There's no such thing as drowning. Like I was all scared for nothing before, is the way it felt like. And I couldn't wait to tell my siblings. They lied to us. There's no such thing as drowning. And then I was down deeper and I was okay, which before that would have terrified me. And the fish are bumping into me. And then this scenario opens up, just like it did, would be 20 years later. I thought about this later, the similarities, but this on my left, this vision opens up. And it's a memory of me looking in, I'm in our living room, looking in a fishbowl. And Mom had got pink rocks and a treasure chest, put them on that fishbowl. And I put my hand in, it's scared of me, but not that treasure chest. And I remember thinking as a kid, why are the fish afraid of my hand, but not this new object? Well, this was answered as I'm dead under the water. The fish know something I don't. They know the difference between something that's alive and dead. And I'm dead. That's why the fish are bumping into me and not afraid of me. I'm dead. But, well, I don't want to be a dead girl bottom of this pond. And I had a scene from the future. I could imagine that my family would be going by in our white station wagon with my mom and the other kids, and they would point to the pond and say, that's where Peg's at. I assumed my body would always be at the bottom of this pond, is my 5-year-old thinking. So I raised up the top of the water, and somehow I knew I had a choice. I could stay below or I could go above. I'm bored with below. I want to go above. So I got as high as the treetops. I thought, that's enough for now. I thought, I'm a little afraid of heights. And I thought, well, that's silly. You're dead. But this is all new to me. I just want to get used to it slowly. And then I heard a voice, a female voice, a certain distance away from me. And because I'm thinking, well, since I can hover, I guess I could fly, because I could see clear to Ohio River. I could see over across Route 7. I could see both directions of the train track. I could see clear at top of our hill above our house. It was like a helicopter, just like hovering. It was cool to look from that vantage point and look down and remember, as a 5-year-old, I could only see, from my height. And then here I am. So I thought, well, I guess which way should I go, left or right? And then I heard a female voice say, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back. And I thought, go back. That's not how death works. You just don't go back. And so I thought, well, I'll be good for a while, but I don't know who this woman is. And I don't think I have to listen to anybody anymore. I don't think, I don't have to eat my vegetables. I don't have to go in at dark. I think I can do whatever I want. And so I went to my right towards Belpre. And there was a white 2-story house, and there was a door on the corner, and I went in that door, and there was older people. Now I'm going to assume that these are ghosts, and they're sitting around the table in the kitchen talking. And these adults are talking. And when I was a kid, you didn't interrupt adults. And so I was kind of quiet and shy. And I said, where can I find kids to play with? And the man sitting at the table, he said, try the graveyards. Now, this seems really weird to me. Like, why the graveyards? I don't think kids would be hanging out at a graveyard, but maybe just trying to get rid of me. I don't know. But that's what was said. And so I went back towards the pond to go to the other direction on the left towards Marietta, and I seen 2 boys walking. And I said, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going? And they just ignored me. But the younger one, we started talking telepathic. We've been fishing. We're in a hurry home. And I realized they couldn't see me. So I flew down the highway and I started running around this yard with these kids, going in and out of houses. But yet I know I never left the center of the pond. And it took me years, decades to try to understand, how do I have these memories? I know I never left the center of the pond, because I remember being still hovering at the center of the pond, treetops, and something informing me my family doesn't love me. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And then it said very clearly, a male voice said, children are sent here to be loved. That is why God sends them here. I'm like, well, that's not fair. You showed me my family don't love me, and then you say that's why God sends them here. So, I'm running around doing all this stuff, having these experiences. At one point, I look down and I see my mom and my sister is on the bed sheet. They've arrived. They're at the first part of the pond, and they're just looking at each other, talking, rubbing lotion. And I'm upset. Like, they don't even know I died. They're not even looking for me. And I felt jealous of my older sister, because I'm thinking I'm never going to be old enough, because I'm dead, to have an adult conversation, older child conversation with my mom like my sister has. And then I look down on the pond and I see my brother, my boy, still doing his laps. And I felt really angry, because he caused me to die. And so at one point through all these things that was happening, I wake up and I'm being carried over my brother's right shoulder. And I see the gray pavement of the road. As I'm dangling, I see my mom, my sister walking up the head on my brother's right. And I'm coughing up water. And it's going to my brother's back. And, I know he thinks that's gross. So he's, Mom, can I put her down now? And my mom and sister turn at the same time and look and see I'm now alive. And my mom went, sigh of relief, nod her head, yes. They both turn around in unison. And now they're whispering as they walk on up the hill. My brother sets me down on my feet on the road for the train tracks, at the bottom of the hill, and just like boom, he's ran that fast. He's up the house. And I have this knowledge now. My family don't love me. Why would I go up to that house to a family who don't love me? I think I'm going to go back to the pond. It really hurts, but I'm not going to fight it this time because I'm going to go back to what I was doing. There's no sense of being in a family who don't love you. And just I took a couple steps to go do that. The female voice I heard before, I now see her. She's in white. She's just all white in this flowing gown, this young, thin woman hovering over the road. And she says, no, don't. I says, why not? You know, they don't love me. She says, well, you'll have a lot of love someday. I said, where will I find it? And she pointed to Belpre. I went on up home. I thought, I got to be my own mother now. Nobody's going to take care of me but myself. And it was like this little tiny mother. And so I got my nightgown on. I grabbed a nursery book. I flipped through. And the old woman that lived in the shoe suddenly just drew me in. There was a page that had beds all lined up. And it was like I was foreseeing my future. Thought that will be my house someday. I will have so many children. I won't know what to do with them all. And I felt because I wasn't loved that I would love maybe orphans, that I would love children that are unloved like me. And, you know, as I'm older now, you know, I'm 61 years old, I'm a great grandmother. And I think, and I put all this stuff together and try to make sense of it, because for so many decades, I was just afraid to even speak of it. It sounds so crazy. And I believe that I got a glimpse of what my life was to be, because I ended up being youngest foster parent in our nearby county. Started at 23 years old doing foster care. At 28, I started doing therapeutic foster care. In 16 years, I ended up having 60 foster kids. And they end up giving me the hardest of the hard kids, even Department of Youth Services kids and high departmental health kids, the kids that would go either to prison or they would go to mental hospitals. But they would give them to me first as a trial. And if I could work with them, then, you know, and there was wealthy parents doing self-pay. So their kids wouldn't go to prison. They would put them in my home. And I got a reputation. And I also became a child abuse investigator. And the first month I was there, I just knew things. I knew things and didn't know how I knew them. And you would think I would get the big head and everybody would think I was great. It was the opposite, because it got to the point I was uncovering county corruption. And I ended up reporting a lot of stuff and a civil rights case. And it went to United States Health and Human Services. And so that's pretty much the bulk of my story. If you want to have questions.
Thank you, Peggy. I know how hard it is to tell your story. Sometimes it's you relive it as you are telling the story, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of joy combined, but it's never easy. And so we understand that here, and we're so appreciative that you've agreed to be with us today and let us know what your experiences were. And the fact that you've had two is an amazing thing. I know people sometimes have more than that, but I would say that perhaps even when you were on the Hill, you might have had a little bit of an experience where you had something mystical happen there as well. All these knowings that you had along the way, or something that just kind of seeped through your pores, it seems. But it's really an interesting story. And I think we're going to have a Q&A, but does anybody else have anything they want to say before we, anything you want to say now, Cyrus? You want to take a break and come back, or dive in? Okay. Who has a question? Anybody have a question? I knew Cyrus would have a question. Hold on.
Hey, Peggy. Thank you so much for sharing. And question I have for you is one I kind of asked you when we spoke on the phone a couple days ago. Just in your experience of interviewing over 200 near-death experiencers now, how have their stories related to your own? What have you kind of learned about yourself and your own experience from talking to all these other NDEers? What's different? What's common? Just anything you've kind of gained and learned from the interviewing.
One of the first things I learned is there's some people that only want to hear New Age near-death experiences. Other people only want to hear Christian near-death experiences. And what I learned is the experiences don't care. I mean, I don't care what you call heaven, if you call it the light, if you call it this realm, if you call it outer space. Some will call that being of light. Other will say that was God, or they say, some see Jesus. And the experiences doesn't care. It's like everybody gets a unique experience tailored just for them. There is an intelligent force that is creating the exact experience that we need to continue our life. And it doesn't matter the experience. I think if people could learn to take the experiences as is, and then take the person as is, because one person may interpret, these beings and all these things as one thing, and then they'll sit and tell you, so therefore life is like this, or heaven is like that, and etc. And another one will start quoting the Bible and say, see, that proves the Bible. And so I like for people to remember, when they watch these, because there's so many different ones, is to separate the experience from the person. And you can kind of listen closely and see where they got the idea that because of their religion, or because of their anti-religion, or a lot of books they've read, or say they got involved with mediums and things. You can see the influence those have on the experience. I don't know if that makes much sense, but that's kind of how I look at them now. Is nobody has to be Christian like me and call it God and call it angels and call this Jesus. Because we all take from it what we want. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I might ask a follow-up question actually, which is that you're describing the influence that someone's spiritual beliefs has on how they experience their experience and what they take away from it and the stories they build around it. What was your kind of spiritual? I know you were a Christian and still are a Christian, but maybe you could say a little bit more about what was your spiritual life like before that, your adult NDE, and how did it change your relationship with God and with your spiritual beliefs?
My parents didn't go to church, but my grandma was very Christian. And so she would make sure a church bus would come pick us 5 kids up and take us to Sunday school. And then as I got older, I was the youngest of the kids, but I was the only one that continued going with my grandma. But then when I got around 15, 16, I got this bad attitude and I didn't, go to church. Then I had a spiritual experience the summer before my senior year. And I wrote a poem back in my book called The Hill. And I just started praying again after, several years of being away from any of that. And I was given steps. You need to do this. You need to get your driver's license. You need to buy a car. You need to save your money. You need to this and this. You need to get over that old boyfriend because it was really causing me some suicidal ideation. And I did all those things. And then 7 years after that, I'm standing on this hill with these children and pregnant for twins and getting ready to build a new home. And I'm married and everything's wonderful. And then the experience of the NDE, because some weird things happened after that. I started saving lives. I started being led, just like that little boy in the ditch. One night we're going down the road and all of a sudden I tell my husband, pull over. I got to go in that house. I went and knocked on the door and I thought, why are you doing this? It was like I had to. And I thought, when somebody comes to the door, I'm going to say, excuse me, I have the wrong house. But my ex-sister-in-law come to the door, and this was her sister's rented house. And I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm babysitting my nephew. I said, take me to him right now. And she took me to the bedroom. And I mean, I ran, I just like instinct. And he was choking on Easter basket grass. And I grabbed him up, took him in the bathroom and started running water and pulling this out. And she says, this day, if you hadn't been there, she says, you saved his life, because she's kind of low functioning and she didn't know what to do. She was opening up the phone book, trying to find her sister to say, where she was at, where say, I can't handle him. And then, I say when I did children's services, I just had this knowing, and I got confessions really easy. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question right, but so because of the near-death experiences and wondering, what is this? What is going on? And I didn't know what it was called. And then years went by, and we had all these had 9 adopted kids at home. Our kids was grown. I'd remarried, and my husband come with 2 daughters. I have 3 boys, and they were grown. And I started putting some things together, like, wait a minute, all these spiritual things started coming, and my heart just like felt like I was like it had opened up. And I started wanting to get the kids back in church, because I had my ex was Catholic, and I was going through his church. And we were married 16 years. We got divorced. So I thought, I don't know what church to go to. So so I got back into church. But there was a time there that I was just working, going to school. I had all these kids. I was busy. And the older I get, the more Christian I feel I am. I mean, I don't go to church anymore. And Neil Helm was doing his PhD dissertation one time, and he did a study, and he calls me Cat in his study. And I just end up with all these psychic experiences that I just had to finally stop and try to put these pieces together and find a truthful meaning and what they mean. And for me, I told him, I says, I am church, because I feel like what I do with my podcast, I feel is church. I would say be non-denominational, because anybody is welcome on. And that's just how I kind of I pay back God for giving me my life back, and let me raise my boys.
So we have a question from within the chat, which is Kim Moore asks that the knowing, in quotes, knowing that happens, can you develop that knowing without an NDE, do you think?
I don't know. I only know what I've experienced. And the knowing has been very hard for me, because sometimes I'll deny it. And I've learned the hard way to not deny it, and to know when it's just my head and worry, imagination, and when it's a knowing, because a knowing is just, it's a no. It. It's not a guessing game. A couple years ago, it hadn't happened in a long time. And then a couple years ago, it happened, and I denied it. I saw a road closed sign, and my husband got out to see what it was, and he come back. I said, it was a motorcycle accident. It wasn't. Because when he got out of the car, I got a knowing. And he said, yeah, he says, it's on past where we travel for our road. They said, we can go on this far and then go on through. And I'm like, no, listen to me. I said, did they say it was a man and woman, or just a woman? And he says, well, it sounded to me like it was just one person. And I said, no. I said, there was a woman on the back, and nobody knows it, but she got thrown off and nobody knows it. And he's like, well, we can't go down there. I said, I got to go down there, and I got to find her. And I have a friend that lives down in that direction. I said, are the cops still down there? Do you think I could come looking? And I denied it to myself. I felt it so strong for hours. There was a woman that got thrown off that motorcycle. And then the next morning, a guy called the sheriff, and he said, that one guy that was in a motorcycle wreck, I think my mom was with him. And they went looking, and they found her body in the weeds. And I will forever kick myself for not trusting them instincts. And I'll know what to do different, because I didn't have to go down there and say, oh, I have this knowing, I'm psychic. I didn't have to say all that. I could have just quietly walked down and looked in the spot to where I could see that where she was. And so I learned a lot from that. And so the knowings is, for me, has been a learning process. That's something I can only do inside myself.
Thank you.
maybe we can open it up now. Does anybody else, if you're on Zoom, probably easiest to put your question in the chat, or if you'd rather ask it yourself, you can virtually raise your hand, and we can call on you to unmute and turn your video on. So does anybody else have a question?
Hey, thanks, Peggy. I was going to ask you, out of all the interviews that you've done, what are the most important takeaways that you've got from it? It's kind of similar to Cyrus's question, but what are the most important lessons or teachings that people are coming back with that you find are that maybe the most important, or that are the most meaningful to you?
I had a man on a month ago named Carlos, and his story really stuck with me, and I'll bring it up sometimes now on my other podcasts. He was drawn in the ocean, and the current kept, pushing him back further, and he was down under the ocean, and he knew he was out of breath and he's out of energy, and he knew this was hopeless. And he said, like, God's will be done, I give up. And he heard God's voice say, ask. He's like, what do you mean ask? I can't ask. There's nothing that can be done here. He was like, ask. And he asked for help. And a dolphin come and lifted him up. A boat come and got it on video. He's hanging on the tail of a dolphin, and they rescued him. And he said, get me to the nearest church. I don't care what kind of church it is. He says, a miracle just happened here. And that really stuck with me, is ask. Because a lot of times we're going through stuff and we don't think to ask. As I'm a Christian, I would say ask God. So is to just point out, ask what it is that you need. And no matter how helpless, you can give it over to God. And it has really helped. And I know it's helped a lot of other people too, because we just live in our misery. We don't stop and ask for help.
Hi, thank you for sharing your story. Do you find in any of your interviews that there's a common denominator for people who have NDEs to have subsequent strained relationships with people around them due to the experience and an inability to communicate with them about it?
Yeah, some people have beautiful experiences, but you can tell, whether it's because they're still young, I don't know, but you can tell by listening to them that they haven't really learned anything from it. They really don't grasp the magnitude or the gratitude. They don't recognize who saved them, that they were saved. They tend to just continue to live a life that isn't changed. It hasn't changed them. And I know mine didn't change me for a long time. I didn't understand it. I couldn't put it all together, what any of it meant. And they're just not there yet. And it's not my job to get them there. You get there when you get there, and it'll be their own journey. We all have our own journey to get to a point where we can have those aha moments.
I think this relates to Albert's question, but you had said when we talked, just the challenge of even just learning about what NDEs were, that they were this phenomenon after you had yours, and then this internal challenge of who to share it with, whether to share it, whether to really identify it as an NDE, and all that went into that decision, and figuring out who to talk to about it. I wonder if you could say a little bit about that process, how that went.
Yeah, I didn't tell my NDE for months, and I finally told my former husband. And he said, I know how it sounds, but I know you and I believe you. And I thought, okay, what do I do with this now? Because it felt like there's more to it than telling one person. I told my sister, she just looked at me like I was weird. I told a friend, and he looked at me like I was weird. So I left it there. And years and years went by. Because I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know it happened to other people. And I started hearing about near-death experiences. I survived and back. I even read a couple NDE books. And I started watching IANDS talks. And one day I thought, is that what mine was? I wasn't claiming mine as an NDE. It was this tucked away, deep down, almost a secret. And I thought, is that what mine was? Because mine was so different. And I thought there must be nothing that would feel better in the world than to be able to tell your story, but that wasn't me. I was always shy and quiet, and I would be the last person to stand up in class to speech, tell a speech, and that was not me. But I thought, what a beautiful thing. And then I found out there was an IANDS group in Columbus, Ohio, 2 hours away from me. And I wanted to go for months, and it almost felt like this must be what it's like for homosexuals come out, they're gay, because I thought I will come out as a crazy person. And I don't want people looking at me like I'm crazy, because I worked hard for my good reputation, after everybody thinking I wasn't even good enough to be married to my first husband, my family thinking that I was worth being knocked out cold and stepping over, pick that thing up. I'm tired of stepping over, and to be reduced to that, and then have got the reputation, and I got the college degrees, and I had the good jobs and of authority. Do I want to go looking like a crazy person? And finally I went to an IANDS group, and they had me talk, and I was hooked. It's something that it doesn't come from your brain, it comes from your soul. When you tell your NDE, you're going from that memory of your soul, not from your brain memory. And so it's effortless. It's not about you. You don't have to worry about what you're going to say next. You don't have to stumble over words. Because when I told about the drowning, I was hovering over the pond. When I told about the ectopic pregnancy, I was in the white light hovering again. And people come to me afterwards and said, I want to touch the light. You're just radiating light. I was levitating. You couldn't see it. It didn't look like it. My feet was on the ground, but I was levitating for hours. And I thought, what is this? What am I feeling? And I have noticed over the years, when I tell my story, even if it's out around a bonfire and I'm just telling a couple people, something happens. One time we were walking back from the bonfire, I just got done telling it, and I felt spirits walking along with us. It's at night, we're walking back to the house. We went into my mother-in-law's kitchen. I sat down. I felt the white around the table glowing. Of course, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying anything. I'm not breathing a word about it. And then it's my mother-in-law and my stepdaughter, Sarah, and I, and we're sitting here talking. When somebody come in the kitchen, they'd stop and turn right around. And I was thinking, don't come in here. That like this is sacred ground. And we were talking about spiritual experiences. And because my stepdaughter, Sarah, she's new to this. And like, what? She'd heard a little bit, but she wanted to know more. And I said, yeah, your grandma, my mother-in-law. I said, she's told me some things. Would you like to tell Sarah stuff she hadn't told her before? And it was this sacred space. A few months later, me and Sarah was driving back one night from visiting our husbands that were working together. The kids asleep in the back seat, her kids. And she started telling, when we were walking to the house, it felt like people were walking with us. It was in the kitchen. It felt like there was this white light. It was like as if I was telling the story. And I'm like, what a confirmation for me that these things I feel that other people experience it too. And, I can tell other times this has happened. And one guy, I had just got done praying for my mother-in-law at the hospital. We all held hands and prayed. And then my husband and I went to the cafeteria, and we come back. My mother-in-law's on the phone with her brother. And when she got out of the hospital after having her heart surgery, she said, I can count on my hand the times my brother has been here. And they lived here 40 years, come to visit. And he says, I got to tell you something happened. He says, after I talked to you on the phone, I had to pull over. A friend was with him. He said, the whole car glowed white inside. He says, I seen this stuff on TV, thought that's just Hollywood talking. I never believed it. And he said, I'm telling you, that whole car turned white. And so I don't know. But there's something about near-death experiencers. I think we bring part of it back with us, and it may lay dormant. And like, here I am, a child, a drowning, and there's things that happen right after the drowning that I start remembering after I remember the drowning. And these spiritual experiences, it's like, so you can have after effects of NDE, not even knowing you had an NDE, being too young to even comprehend an NDE. Now that's the proof in the pudding for me, is to know that these things exist, whether we acknowledge them, whether we believe in them, whether we turn them into a Christian testimony or not. They exist regardless. And there's someone intelligent controlling every bit of it. There's always a voice that says, either it's your time, it's not your time to go back, or they're given some kind of information, or, like the drowning, I'm doing all these things and I'm given this information. My family didn't love me. I had people in groups, after a group, say, there's no way God would tell you that your family didn't love you. I said, well, it's true. I mean, if I could bring my siblings and my mother here right now, they'd say, we always hate her and we still hate her. They only feel bad that they didn't get to do more to me. They didn't get by with more. And so, at 5 years old, I was given a truth that I would have had no way of knowing, but it was absolutely true.
So Michael Gemignani asked, and this may be two questions. It could have the similar answer or different answers. What did your NDE teach you about love? And what was the greatest takeaway that you had from your NDE?
My 25-year-old NDE, their ectopic pregnancy, the fact that when I was back in that chair, after I was told it wasn't my time, I was told the answer was no, I accepted it. That felt like forgiveness. That felt like love. A lot of people in their NDE, they'll say, oh, I felt so much love. I didn't feel that. I was fighting mad. I was crying. I was horrified. To be dead at 25 and have these children. But when I was back in that wheelchair, it was like, wow, God just did this for me. I felt like he violated the laws of nature. Like I said, I thought this never happened to anybody before, ever. And I felt like God just violated the laws of nature for me. And that's something I carry with me at all times.
You get closer so I can read this other question. From Kim, she asked, can you call on beings to help you? Like loving beings or angels around us all the time? And if so, what is your opinion on why they may or may not show up or speak to us?
Whenever the few times that beings have showed up in my life, I never called upon them. They were just there. The first time I was kidnapped and raped when I was 16, I got put in a home for my protection because my stepdad said he was going to kill me to the police. And so when I returned home and I returned to school, I thought everybody knew about this. And it was so embarrassing. And I was out in the smoking area and I heard a voice say to me, why don't you go in and have a hot meal for a change? Do something good for your body instead of hurting it. Because I was, I'd smoke, they'd pass me pot or alcohol, whatever. I didn't care. I thought, yeah, I will do that. As soon as I opened that door to walk in, go do that, I seen this guy and I heard a voice say, that's what goodness looks like, that I was to not approach. And then it continued telling me stuff off and on. And then the last day it said to me, because we were getting ready to move, go to another school, and I wouldn't see this person. I never did approach him. And it said that someday we would be together again, but I had to go become a better person first. And 20 years later, I met my second husband. We're getting ready to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. And there's stories that goes with that too. When we met, I followed where led, and I listened. But as far as calling on, I just pray. And then see what happens. And sometimes I get these knowings, or I get these little nudges, or these voices, or wake up and hearing a song. And something about the lyrics will kind of tell me, give me an answer of what I was thinking of. And I think maybe for everybody it's personal of how they interact with the other side.
Jay here in the back.
Yes, thank you. Could you describe this voice or being that you interacted with either the first or the second time? Was it the same kind of thing or different? And what's about this voice or being in all your interviews? Go ahead.
The voice, when I heard God's voice during my second NDE, for example.
Well, it's just a general question from your experience or your interviews. That's kind of a summary.
They just say a voice said. Sometimes they will say if it was female or if it was male. Some think that it's Mary Mother. Some say it's Jesus. Some say it's God. Some say it was a spirit. Some say it was an angel or a angelic being. It varies of what they are told, what guidance they're given.
My question is could you describe the attributes of this voice being Madonna, whatever?
Well, during the drowning, the female voice was an adult, young female voice. And I recognized it when I seen Angel hovering over the road that it was her, because hovering over the pond, she says, no, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back. Over the road, when I was headed back to the pond after the drowning, she says, no, don't, meaning don't go back to that pond. Don't go kill yourself. And she says, no, don't. I says, why? You know, they don't love me. And she was like, like she got me there, kind of, well, you'll have a lot of love someday when you have your own family. And so that was a female voice. After the drowning, a few days later, my family went to go fishing. 5 kids, mom and dad, Vito Lake, not far from our home. And I was bored with fishing, and I ventured out into the woods. I was being led. Something's like, come over here. I want to go over here. This pretty, lake. No, come over here. Over on the right. And I was like, ew, it's all ugly. It's all, brown, dry cracked mud and sticks and leaves. Ew. But I saw a flower, and I sat down, and I'm like, how did you get here? Mind you, I'm 5 years old. How did you get here? How did you grow from under this rock? And all of a sudden, I believe that the angel communication just started again from the drowning. And it was letting me know that I was going to have a long, hard road ahead of me. And it showed me visions of little girls in Sunday school. They had long, pretty hair and bows and pretty dresses and socks and shoes. And I'm just poor with this pixie haircut and ragged hand-me-downs are too big. And God showed me that you're like this wildflower, and those girls are like the expensive flowers, that you don't need all that showering. And that I was going to have a will inside of me, because I have a long, hard road to go. But because of it, I have a strength inside of me those girls would never know. I would have the will of a wildflower. That's why I called my book that. And that was a soothing voice. It was just information, like it was foretelling my future. And then as far as a voice, then it was when I was 17, before my senior year. And I was given those steps. It was a guidance and a knowing that you need to do this and you need to do that. And I go, okay. The loudest and the clearest I heard God's voice as not being dead. The day my ex told me after 16 years of marriage, she wanted a divorce. You can have the kids, you can have the house. This is how much I agreed to pay child support, took the kids and went to the first visit. And I was alone here in my house. And I was the type of person, I never let anybody see me cry, because nobody ever cared if I did. I took all my stuff inside. And so I went to the bathroom. We live out in the country. There's no other houses around or no TV on or anything. And I'm sitting on the toilet and I'm crying and my face is beet red and so hot. And I'm saying, God, my parents never loved me. My siblings never loved me. Now my husband of 16 years don't love me. And I'm bawling, like, what's wrong with me? And then I heard over in front of the mirror and the sink of the bathroom, I heard, my child. And I'll never forget that. I heard God say, my child. And I was like, what? I just like, what? And this hot face and all these tears and crying went to laughter and cold tears coming down this hot face. I got up and I'm dancing around the living room. I'm rejoicing. And I'm like, that's right. God's the only family I need. And so I guess everybody, like I say, has their own relationship with who they have relationships with. And mine just happens to be a very close relationship with God. And I choose that because I can get away when I get angry and I get mean and then I realize I'm the one that's pulled away. And for me to get through my life, I have come to trust my experiences. I have come to trust myself. I'm an honest person. I cannot think of one person that will come to you and say, that woman tells lies. No woman hallucinates. That's just not me. And that's why it's so hard for me to come out about the experiences, because I knew people would think those things about me.
Question is, did you have a life review at all in either of your near-death experiences?
When I used to first hear about life review, I thought, I can't conceive of that. What are they talking about? But then I realized when I talked about the record player, when I was telling God all the abuses I went through, that was like a life review in a way, but it was me showing God my life, not God showing me my life. I was going through every abuse because I was telling him I cannot have one thing that happened to me happen to my boys. And that's why I had to go back. I didn't want my kids to be raised like me without a mother's love and protection.
Any other questions?
Hey, Peggy, it sounds like you devoted a lot of your life to being a good mother.
Thank you.
How are your kids and what are they up to?
My oldest son, Matthew, he was in the military and he was injured in Afghanistan and he almost lost his leg, but he didn't. Last year, he won third place in world championship in jiu-jitsu. He is regional manager for OSHA and he has 6 kids at home. And I'm so proud of him. And my next son, Jeremy, him and his wife are like managers and accountants for the Air Force Base. So they're federal government workers. And my son works for a contract for Space Force. And they have 4 kids at home. They both all have college degrees. I'm so happy and thrilled for them. They're such good parents. And our Nathan, that was my nephew that we had ended up adopting. He recently moved back home, not to our house, but nearby. And so we're so excited to have one of the kids back home because the other boy's up around Columbus, which is a couple hours away. And then my husband's daughters, one's a chef in Chicago, one's an accountant. And then the 9 adopted kids are a bitter disappointment, to be honest. But they're doing better now that they're in their 30s. It's like through their 20s. It's like they were still teenagers. They still weren't figuring out, and they were doing everything. They went back to their biological parents when they turned 18, who were on drugs and drinking and a lot of crap. And 2 of them lost custody of their kids. But now that they're in their 30s, they're starting to settle down and get their lives in order. The youngest one, who's will soon be 28, he just lost custody of his 2 little ones, and we're very, very close with his kids. And little boy was named after my husband. And so we're in the process of becoming kinship care for those children. because they're in foster care right now. The mom and dad's on drugs. A lot of stuff going on it's not supposed to.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot. That's 10 lifetimes of energy you just talked about.
We just retired.
Anybody else? Kathy, you got a question?
I don't have a question. I just want to say that I've thoroughly enjoyed your talk today, and there may be other questions while I talk. If somebody has a question, go ahead and speak up. But I just want to say that I really thoroughly enjoyed your talk today. I've watched a lot of the NDE TV interviews, and I just find them amazing. And, you know, you sit down, you just get in the chair and you go and you talk and you chat. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity for people to have that voice we talked about earlier. And with regard to everything that you've done in life, you know, they say that, you know, our treasures are not of this earth. But I think that a lot of NDEers would say that all of your intentions, all the things that you've done to be a good person and try to help people, that's your treasure on the other side. And I think that you're going to be very, very rich in those experiences on the other side. And
Thank you.
yeah, and I know you've been through a lot, but that I think that's your reward. I think you've persevered through it all, and you are gathering up your treasures for heaven in a different way than people normally think about it here on planet Earth. So, but that, let's see, do we have a question? Oh, thank you, IANDS, and to Pegi for such a helpful presentation and a life. That was from Kim Moore. And I think that's it, guys. Is that it? Yeah.
I just want to echo the thanks to you, Pegi. Really gave an excellent presentation, and you said that people know you to be an honest person, and that really comes out just how earnest and authentic you are just in sharing immediately from your experience, and just as it is, just as it has been for you. So very grateful from behalf of ISH, everybody in this room, everybody online. Thank you so much for being willing to be with us and be vulnerable and share your story.